Hello and welcome. And in this video I'm going to try to show you everything there is to know about Google Analytics events. First, let's start about talking about what an event actually is. So in Google Analytics, an event defines, generally speaking, any kind of user interaction with content that is different from a page load. So what this means is you normally use events to track things such as when users play a video on your website, or when they download the file, or when they sign up for a different form, like a newsletter sign up, for example. But you can also use events to track other things. For example, for enhanced e-commerce, a lot of the functionality of it is tracked using events. And also you can use it to track things like how much someone scrolls on a web page. You can create a custom event handler using JavaScript to see if someone scrolled 25% of your page, 50%, 100%, or indeed whatever percent might be relevant for you. Another use of events that I've seen is sometimes some developers use events to track errors that they might find on their website. So maybe a resource on the website fails to load for a user, and then they send that to Google Analytics as an event. It is a valid use case, but for that, Google Analytics actually has a hit type called exceptions, and you should be using the exceptions hit type to track those, but you can also use events if that's more suitable for your workflow. Probably the most important thing to know about events is that they count towards your hit limits. So in case you're not aware, Google Analytics, the free version, has a per property hit limit of 10 million hits per month. Now, what is a hit? According to Google Analytics, a hit can be a page view or a screen view, an event, e-commerce transactions, social interactions, the exceptions that I mentioned earlier, and also page timings. So by default, Google Analytics tracks some page timing of some users, but if you want to increase that percent, keep in mind that it counts towards your hit limit. So knowing this thing that events count towards your hit limit automatically should make you think a bit about how many events you want to implement and making sure they're all relevant events. A common misuse I see both in Google Analytics but also other analytics platforms is that people start to measure a lot of things without actually ever needing those elements that they're measuring for any kind of purpose. So it is good to measure as many things as possible, but you should also, at the same time, you should only be measuring the things that you're only going to be using in your data analysis and that they are valid for you. So keeping this in mind when you're creating your events. So let's quickly see how you actually set up an event in Google Analytics. So I have this website here, a very simple website that currently has no kind of events configured, and I'm just going to quickly refresh the page so we can see it in the real-time reports in Analytics. As you can see, it recognizes me as one user active on the website right now. But still in this event list, it doesn't show anything, and that is because I haven't created any events. So how do you create an event? Well, let's go to the developers.google.com website that explains everything that it is to know technically about events and about any technical subject in Google Analytics. So the first thing you see here is that I'm using the gtag.js version, and this is important. Make sure you're using the correct version. So Analytics every few years changes the version of their script. If you have an older site, you might be using the analytics.js or maybe even an older version. So make sure you have upgraded to the gtag.js, or if not, and you still want to continue using your old version, make sure you navigate on this website to the correct code syntax for your version. And Google Analytics tells me that this is the code that I need to use to create an event. So let me just quickly copy that and I'll input that in the code of my website. So I'm here editing the HTML of this website, and I'm just going to throw in this event somewhere on the page. Because it is a piece of JavaScript, basically, I'll have to wrap it in some kind of a script or some kind of a way of with interaction with the page so it actually gets sent. So I'm going to open here a script tag, and I'm just going to paste my event code here. And as you can see, an event has 4 main components. The first one and the main one is action. The second one is the category, even though these two appear in the reverse order in the Google Analytics report. So first you see category and then you see action, but the action is actually the main one. Then you have an event label, which is an optional field, and you have also an event value, which is an optional field. Now, any of these, except for the value, can be pretty much anything you want. So you can call them whatever makes sense for you. You can put words there, you can put numbers, it doesn't really matter. But you obviously want to track events so that you can measure things on your website, and you want them to have meaningful names. So I encourage you to always give meaningful names. And what do I mean by that? In the category, I always call my events based off of the content that I'm trying to measure with them. So for example, if I have a video embedded on my website and I want to see how many people play the view, or they pause the video, or they interact with the video somehow, I generally label that event category as video or videos. On the other hand, I might have forms on my website. So someone signing up for a newsletter, or someone completing a contact form and sending it to us, or maybe filling out a complaint form and so on. And I call all of these, I put them in the category of forms. Sometimes I track, as I explained earlier, you can track how much someone scrolled on a page. Sometimes I track that, and I put those in the category of articles. So you can use whatever naming convention makes sense for you, but make sure you keep it consistent and that you know what measures what. Because later it's going to be very important and very easy when you create any kind of custom segments or filters in analytics. As long as then you have a good naming convention and you're consistent, it's easy to create those and to apply them. Another thing to remember is that Google Analytics is case sensitive. So an event once written with a capital letter and once with a small letter, they're two different things in Google Analytics, so be consistent with that as well. So since this doesn't really matter what I put on this website, I'm just going to put as the category example. And at the action, similarly to my categories, I always like to call my actions based on what the user actually does. So coming back to that example of videos, if I have a video embedded, I'll have an event with the category of video, but then in the action, they're going to have play, so the user starts playing, or pause, so the user paused the video, or stop, so the user stopped the video. So in the same category, you see I might have multiple actions. But in this case, since it doesn't really matter, I'm going to call it test. And maybe you have noticed I've already did a mistake. So these actually have to be between quotes for them to work. So I just put quotes around them. And then the other thing that you can configure, you don't have to, but I highly recommend that you do, is the event label. And in the event label, I like to put the exact element where the user took action on. So let's say I have a website, I have 2 videos on. One of them is called Google Analytics, the other is called Google Tag Manager. So in the category, I'll have the category as video. The action is going to be either play or stop or pause. And then in the label, I'm actually going to put the title of the video itself. So Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager in this case. So in my case here, I'll just put song label. And in the value, so the value can hold numerical values. And what's really important to know is that it only supports positive integers. So for example, the number 5 or the number 100 or 10,000. you cannot put decimal points or floats. So you cannot put the number 5.2, for example. And it also does not support negative numbers. So you cannot put -1. And this is very important to keep in mind, because this is one of the reasons I sometimes see events not working for people. In the value they put like a decimal number, and that just makes it not work. So I'll put a value here of 5, for example. And I'm gonna save this page, and I'm gonna switch back to my website, refresh it, and then we're gonna see what happens in Google Analytics. So I'm here on my website, and it's time to hit the refresh button and see what happens. I press refresh. Now I'm gonna go to Analytics. It usually just takes a few seconds. And as you can see, that event fired. So I have exactly what I've put on my website, the event category example, the event action test. And that's pretty much it. I have an event working. But as you saw, I just loaded this event when the page loads, and that's generally not something you want to do with events. You normally want events to happen when users take some kind of an action on your website. For example, they press a button or they fill out a form or any of those. So I'm gonna go back to my code and put this event inside of a button. So I'm back here editing my website. So what I need to do is remove these script tags, and instead I'll create a button tag. And I'll press enter a couple of times here. And I want this Google Analytics code to fire only when someone presses the button. So in this case, because this is a button, I have to put a specific handler, which is called onClick. So this code fires when someone clicks on the button. So I just have to write here onClick, and then just paste this Google Analytics code inside of there. I'm gonna save this page and go back to my website, and let's see what happens. So I'm back here on the website, and I'm gonna refresh the page. And as you can see, a button appeared there. It looks a bit strange because it doesn't have any kind of label on it. Let me just quickly add a label, so some text on the button. And I'm just gonna write press me. Okay, save this, go back to my website, refresh the page. Okay, so now I refresh the page, but as you see, I have no new events in Google Analytics. And this is because now the event is not firing when the page loads, but actually when I press the button. And as you can see, now I have the event coming into Google Analytics. So it is working. Obviously in events, sometimes you can configure the event to pull in dynamic values. So instead of always just hard coding the event category and action and label, and especially value, you can actually have those coming in as dynamic values, and that makes sense in a lot of cases. So what else can you do with events in Google Analytics? Well, the first thing, you can create a goal in Google Analytics based off of events. And to do that, you have to go to Admin. And under Admin, go to Goals. And here you can create a new goal tracking an event. So I press New Goal. I skip all of these templates and I go straight to Custom, Continue. I'm gonna give it a name. So let's say this is Button Press Tracker. Of course, you can name your goals whatever you want, but as the same as naming your events, you should try to have a consistent naming method and always know what's what. And then I have, from the type, I have to choose event, press Continue. And I'll have to give it I have to fill in at least one of these elements. So either just a category or an action or a label. So this is interesting because you can actually, let's say you have 10 different videos on your website and all of them is being tracked in the category of video, and you want to track as a goal anytime someone plays a video, you don't really care which one of them and you don't care what action they take on the video. So you can just create a goal tracking the category of video. So in my case, I have a category of example, and let's see if some of the data already got processed in Google Analytics. You can verify the goal. And as you can see, it showed so far it gives me 0% conversion rate, and that is because there is some time lag between when you see something in real time when it actually gets reported in Google Analytics. Another very important thing and interesting thing to know about goals based off of events is that you can actually assign values to the goal these ways. Normally, when you can create in Google Analytics a goal in Google Analytics, you can only give it a static value. But if you create a goal off of an event with a value, you can actually use the event value as a goal value in Google Analytics. And you can activate or turn off that feature by using this toggle switch here. And this is a very, very powerful feature. Let's say you only sell a few products on your website and you don't want to bother implementing the enhanced e-commerce functionality. You can just track the sales of those products via events and then create a goal based off of those events, and you automatically get the value of each different product in that goal. And now that I have this goal created, I can just press save, and that's it. It's now going to track it's going to track as goal all the events with a category of example that get completed on my website. Another very important thing to know about goals is the fact that a goal is considered an interaction hit on your website. And this affects the way that bounce rate gets measured on your website. So the way that Google Analytics measures time spent on a website and bounce rate is as a subtraction between two subsequent timestamps. So if I visit a page, I stay on it for a few minutes, and let's say 2 minutes later I click and I go to another page on the website, that is going to be seen as a 2-minute visit or session in Google Analytics. However, if I just leave the website from the same page I landed on without navigating to another page, that's going to be a 0-second session in Google Analytics, and it's going to be considered as a bounce. And sometimes you might not want that functionality, or you don't want Google Analytics to behave that way. You might want, for example, if someone plays a video or they scroll long enough on the website, that does not get counted as a bounce. And to do that, you have to configure an additional parameter in your goal and set the goal as a non-interaction. And if you go back to the measurement page on the Google developers site for events, and you scroll all the way down, you actually see here what you would have to add to your goal. So non-interaction, and give it a value of true. So this is a Boolean element, which means it can only be true or false. So in this case, we're going to have to add it as true if we don't want it to count as an interaction event. By default, all events count as interactions, so you only need to add this line if you don't want to count as an interaction. For the GTag version of Google Analytics, you also have a default list of events that you can configure, and these mostly have to do with e-commerce. And also some of them you see with actual search and selecting content on the website. So I recommend you to actually look through these default events and maybe implement them the way that Google recommends. One more thing that you need to keep in mind around events is that there is a limit of how many hits a Google Analytics session can process. So that limit is Google Analytics only processes 500 hits per session. So if you define a lot of events they might not all get processed if they're happening very often one of another. And the mistake sometimes I see here, for example, I see people creating events that fire for every second of a, so you have a video on a website and for every second it plays, it fires a different event. So you can see how that you can very easily reach the 500 hits per limit session by doing that. So you shouldn't create that, or if you're creating some kind of an event that fires every few seconds when the person sits on a web page without interacting with anything, make sure it's actually long enough so that it doesn't hit that limit. You should also, of course, think about how you're going to implement the events when you're writing out your measurement plan. Think about everything that is relevant on your website to measure and create them at that time. So we already saw how to add events to the web page and how they appear in the interface. Now let's look a bit at how they appear in the reporting. So I'm going to switch to a demo account here, and I'm going to go a bit under behavior and here under events, and I'm going to look at the overview tab first. So in the events overview, the first thing you see is how many events happened in total, how many of them are unique, and you can read more about it, about what means unique in Google Analytics and what's the difference between total events and unique events. And that has to do with the naming convention of your events. So if you have multiple events with the same action in one session being hit, then they're not going to be counted as unique events. You have the event value, so this is only going to increment if you're actually sending a value. And the way this increments, it basically adds every time. So let's say you have 3 events, one with the value of 5, one with 10, and one with 20. The total event value here would be 35, and the average value would be the overall session with the event, the number of the overall value divided by the overall number of session with events. And in this case, you see I have 3,000 sessions, so that would be 35 divided by 3,500, so it's going to be 0 point something. Under the top events, you have all of the events that are on the website, and they're listed in the order of which one of them happens more often. And in this case, you see there are only 2 event categories. So one of them is the enhanced e-commerce and the other is around contact us. And the default view here is based off of events category, but you can also actually switch the view and see it as event action, or you can even go deeper and see it as event label if you have any kinds of level of labels set up. If I go back to event category, or indeed any of these, I can also add a secondary dimension. So maybe I want to see a breakdown of event category, but also with event action on the same page. So I can add here event action. And now, well, I'm gonna see like the combination of event category and event action and which one of them is most popular. You can, of course, also do a search here if you want to only see something specific on the screen. So you can press the advanced option here to select exactly where you're searching. So I actually want to search in event category, and I want events category only containing contact us. And Google Analytics is actually smart enough in any of these menu when you start filling in to only give you valid options. So I'm going to press apply. And this view is now basically filtered based on what I searched here. So I only see the events in the category contact us. And by pressing the X here, I can eliminate that. And of course, you can also use the graph to add different other metrics on it if you want to have a different visualization here. The next page in the events menu is the pages menu, and this actually shows the page where you have the event triggering on. So on the store page, over 9,000 events have been triggered on this page. And this is a good way to measure, for example, if you have, let's say, a contact form at the bottom of each of the pages on your blog. This is a simple way to see which of the pages actually generates the most contacts being sent to your website. Or if you have videos on multiple pages, you could easily see on which page people play videos the most, and so on. And the last menu, which I think it's not used as much as it could, is the events flow. And the events flow actually gives you a visualization of how people basically navigated from one event to the other. By default, they are grouped by country. And this, you can decide if it's a good combination for you, or you would actually want them combined by something else. So you can use the drop-down list, and you see here you have a lot of different options that you can select them from. So you might want to go, for example, with operating system if that is interesting for you, or any kind of pretty much most of the things that Google Analytics can track, you can select them in here and have this visualization built upon that. You can also filter what you see here. So for example, let's say I don't want all of these countries. I could press on this sprocket and I can add up to 5 items. And let's say I maybe want to see Japan, and why not Jamaica? You can only add up to 5 items here. And I'm going to apply that. And now it only highlights all of that traffic through these nodes. And the way you read this report is all of the lines you see going from one to the next means that that traffic flew through there. And all of this red traffic that you see dropping off, it doesn't mean that those people left the site. It just means that they didn't complete any other event after this. And you can press on any of these boxes, and you can highlight the traffic through that one. So for example, if I go to this one and I want to see how people got to here and went from there, I can go highlight traffic, and you can see most of the people that ended up completing this event completed some other events and not the main ones. And you can also group different details, or you can go with explore traffic through here. And you see it highlights this specific category and gives you the steps that happen through it and the steps that are following. So this now becomes like the central view. And you can add steps before, or you can add steps after. Now, sometimes you might be here and you don't know how to get out of this visualization. Just press the events flow up in the corner. And obviously from the main visualization as well, you can actually scroll to the right and you can add further steps, and you can visualize this as in depth as you can. So as you see, for this selection, I only have up to 8 levels deep. And you can select from your level of details how you want the details to be seen. So do you want them to have them divided into category, action, label, or maybe something fewer? So if you just select category, then you'd have all the events grouped up at the category level, even though they have multiple types of actions or multiple labels. And of course, you can export this data or add segments to it and do what you can in pretty much any other Google Analytics interface. Another great way to add events to the website, and it is the way I mostly do it on websites I manage, is to do it via Google Tag Manager. And I have videos in my Tag Manager section explaining how you do that. I hope you found this useful, and I hope it helps you better understand events and how you can use them. Thank you for watching.